Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Oil and Gas Rundown Live here at King Operating in Dallas, Texas. My name is Rachel Griffith. I'm a Senior Vice President here on our Partner Relations side. And today, joining me to talk about the wonderful industry of oil and gas is our EVP of Land and Business Development, Bill Phillips. Hey, Bill.
Good afternoon, folks.
And then, of course, Ian Crane, our Reservoir Engineer. Ian, welcome to the show today.
Thank you.
Good to have you with us. Ian hasn't been on quite as much, so we'll get a little bit more about who he is and what all he does here in just a minute. But Bill, I'd like to start with you today, and I'd like to kind of understand, right now since March and everything that's happened overseas, we've seen a little, those higher elevated commodity prices. And how does that really, what I'd like to know is how does that kind of affect acreage right now or acquisition opportunities? Do you see a difference than, say, end of last year compared to now?
Well, it's a little slower in the first half of 2026. It's more of a seller's market for high quality, contiguous producing acreage, and kind of a buyer's market when that same acreage is scattered or non-operated or capital starved. So for a company like us that has our Bivens Ranch, we have both high quality, contiguous producing acreage. So that's a very much positive. For oil and gas, the oil economics are pretty supportive with the higher prices that we're having. Natural gas is a little weak near term, but strategically attractive, specifically for Gulf Coast gas that will go toward LNG plants and go across the globe. Both of those prices for oil and gas fluctuate. Gas has been a little more stable in the 280 to 340 an MCF range. Oil prices due to the ongoing conflict with Iran has been kind of all over the place. Currently sitting at about 82 and change. That's been lower, it's been higher. We've seen swings that can occur daily. So patience is a good word if you're evaluating an oil property versus a gas property.
Yeah, patience is definitely key. Do you anticipate if we continue to see elevated prices with WTI, into next year, does that change the landscape for maybe what type of acreage is available? Do you see more more oil and gas companies actively looking to obtain leases, or does it stay moderately the same?
Well, overall, it really kind of, it's hard to say. Public companies take a longer range view than, say, companies that are private equity backed, because the models or the business models are different. So Exxon will evaluate something in a different manner than a company that's private equity backed, however, that may be real large. Because Exxon's their model is not to buy and sell, their model is to buy and keep, whereas a company funded by private equity has a life cycle. Life cycle could be buy and sell in 3 years, buy and sell in 5 years. So it depends upon how you're funded. Makes a big difference in the evaluation of properties like that. That's also a great question for Ian, because with the big public companies, they all have internal reservoir engineering departments. Some of the private equity guys too, but I would suggest that's Ian's background, is to take a longer view rather than a shorter view.
Okay, Ian, so that means Bill is tossing the ball to you. So before you kind of dive into that question, tell us a little bit about your background, Ian, and tell us what exactly it looks like to be the type of reservoir engineer that you are.
Yeah, thanks. I've been in the industry now about 35 years. I started in Canada and worked about roughly 2/3, 60% of my career has been in Canada, doing a range of anything from development through operations, or sorry, through exploration, I should say, and primarily North American continent, but have dabbled a bit with some stuff across the ocean, like Mideast, a little bit in Africa, those sorts of things. Interesting side note is, of course, not surprisingly, the reservoirs don't really care what country or political system is above it. They speak the same language, which is kind of neat. But so I've been working in Dallas for over the last 10 years, and now reservoir engineer, a lot of people don't know what that is. I often don't like describing it because people don't understand. But one way to look at it is a reservoir engineer's job is, first of all, technical. And we look at maybe if you think about a weather forecaster, we're trying to forecast a bunch of complex stuff that's going on under the ground instead of up in the sky. So we are looking at all the variables we can and using physics-based estimates to project what's going to happen in the future. Where are the oil and gas production rates going to go? Help figure out the best way to drill and access the production with our geology counterparts. And one of the typical jobs of a reservoir engineer is to try to pull together models that include our own sort of the technical work on the engineering side for the reservoir function itself, but also bringing in help or working with drilling, completions, with land, with geology, with accounting, really all the groups that are required to keep this industry running, and pull all that information together in models that we can use or that management can use to make good decisions on the business decisions that must be made regarding where to drill, how fast to drill, where not to drill, all those. I suppose another one would be when to acquire or not, or to sell, vice versa.
Okay, yeah, I know you had come in and you had worked with our, partner relations team. You had showed some of those models, correct? That's similar to what you're talking about, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. There's all kind of models we do. A lot of the function of reservoir engineer tends to move towards economics also, which would be trying to marry the technical expectations with the actual cost of doing business and the revenues, and that way get a financial picture of what things are going to cost and what kind of return we'd expect in the future.
Yeah, which of course is important to operators like us and our investors. So it sounds like that's a big part, obviously, of what we look at. What you guys are looking at is making sure those economics make sense, right? Make sense for King, make sense for investors to be able to make money and participate in these programs. So, okay, Ian, last question before I switch back to Bill. So just give me one example of maybe a favorite project you worked on and where.
Well, it's an interesting question. There've been a lot, but the one that jumps, yeah, the one that jumps to mind is actually the one we're working here at King, which is the Bivens Ranch. Now, this is a property I first saw in maybe 2022, working at another company, and it's definitely got its challenges. But I found I kind of fell in love with it because one thing we look for, and this is working as when we work in exploration, one of the things that is really critical when we're looking at drilling, going into somewhere where little or none has been drilled in the past. If there's an offset well that has, you might call it an oil show or proven oil, I've seen seasoned explorationists get excited over, say, a 10 barrel a day test out of some interval, because they say, wow, this is exciting. If I move 2 miles from here up dip, this could just work into, could get 100 barrels a day or more. And while we get to Bivens, we've got this really large acreage block that has uh, wells that have been drilled in all kinds of locations on the block, and each one of them uh, producing 100 barrel a day plus, and it sort of redefines the idea of being de-risked. It's like very exciting to see production proven in all these different portions of this very large, call it a bed sheet that we get to develop. So it's very exciting to be part of the team to look at that and try to extract value going forward. As I say, we obviously got challenges, but we that old adage that if it was easy, it would have been done a long time ago. But we're up for the challenge and really look forward to accessing that value that we know is there. It's just a matter of getting after it. It reminds me of a quote that I'd heard. I'm sure you've all heard it. I think a sculptor would say that they're not they're not making a shape. They're just removing rock to find the masterpiece that's inside it. And that might be a way we're looking at Bivens, as we know we got a chunk of rock that's got a great future, and we're just trying to figure out how to best access that and get into that internal core.
Right. So is the history, well, however many hundred years of history in oil and gas, right? It's there. How exactly to best get it out? Bill Phillips, let's just talk, since Ian brought up Bivens Ranch and just kind of mentioning how it is 60,000 contiguous acres. I mean, really in the state of Texas, if we're talking about Texas, how is that what you would say is rare to find that kind of leased acreage that's contiguous? Is that normal? Is it easy to find these days? Or is Bivens kind of unique because it's also a resource play that's 60,000 acres?
Right. Well, it depends upon what part of the state you're in. In East Texas, for example, where the Haynesville is located, the Haynesville gas play, there are a few large tracts of 20, 30,000 acres. However, the overwhelming majority of acreage in East Texas are small tracts. And for example, 60,000 acres we have basically under one lease. In East Texas could be easily several thousand individual leases. Mm-hmm. We have basically two mineral owners that actually own the minerals under the Bivens Ranch. And for example, in East Texas, that same size block could easily have tens of thousands of mineral owners, each one requiring a lease. So they're drastically different. As you move toward the Eagle Ford in South Texas, that's Central Texas, just south of San Antonio on the way over to Houston, there's a large tract would be 4,000 acres. You might get lucky and find one larger, but they're horribly expensive. But the average probably size oil and gas lease in the Eagle Ford could be 300 acres or 50 acres. And in each of those tracts, you may have 150 mineral owners. So you go to South Texas, south of, say, Corpus Christi down to the Mexican border. You have the King Ranch, Doc Briscoe ranches, Roger Welder's, Tom O'Connor's. Some of those are upwards of several 100,000 acres.
Wow.
And you're not going to lease all of those. You're going to lease just small portions of those. Exxon in the King Ranch that covered just under 1 million acres had one lease that lasted for 99 years. And when 99 years was up, If it was producing, you held units around the producing acreage and the balance of it expired. So now you're going back to the King Ranch folks and leasing smaller tracts anywhere from 1,000 to say 30,000 acres. When you go out toward Midland in the Permian Basin, the average size tract out there is probably just a few hundred acres. So it just depends upon what portion of the great state of Texas you're in.
And it is a huge state. It is a huge state. So, Ian, we actually had a question on our LinkedIn that I'm going to have you answer. Joseph was asking, what data or diagnostics most quickly de-risk a potential acquisition from your perspective as a reservoir engineer?
If I understand, the question might be what sort of data is most important? Is that?
I would think so. What data or diagnostics? So I think he's saying what data helps to quickly, most quickly de-risk a potential acquisition from your perspective as a reservoir engineer. So I guess what data are you looking at before, going into an acquisition? If you're a reservoir engineer, that does help de-risk some of the project.
I'll try. That's challenging because one thing that if you know any reservoir engineers, you know that we are data hounds, and to say that there's one piece of data that I want, that's a tough one. Is like I love all data, but I would say the most important piece of information is the production data. And when I say production, that is really three things: it's oil, gas, and water rates. That's critical. If we have the production data, we can calculate a whole bunch of other stuff from there, as long as we have trustworthy production data. At the same time, we need trustworthy cost data. So really, really important to know the cost to drill, to complete pipelines, facilities, and also what's called lease operating expenses. In other words, a record of what the operator has spent on a monthly basis to keep the operation running. So those would be the absolute critical pieces. In some cases, we get downhole pressure data. That's pretty exciting for someone like me, because that would be, if there's one area of the industry I've always enjoyed, it's something called pressure transient analysis. But I won't go into that here, but that can be very important depending on where we're at. One thing I did not mention, which is also quite critical, is what we call plant statements, which would be from where the gas that gets produced goes to gas plants. The operator of the gas plant would provide detailed statements that show exactly how much liquids come out of the gas, natural gas liquids, things like butane and pentanes plus, because they're a highly valuable commodity, and we got to get that right to get the true commercial value of the wells. Mm-hmm. So that'd be the start, I would say. I mean, again, I don't know if I would take any data I can find, but those would be my favorites.
Did you hear that, Bill? Ian loves data, and that's exactly why you are a reservoir engineer, Ian. But that's amazing. So,
what? Can I say one thing, Rachel?
Yes.
Looking at Bill and saying, well, the one I missed, a really important, one of the key foundational bits of data is the land information. It's critical to know what is the working interest and what royalties are paid on the production and things of that nature. Because if you get that wrong, you're starting off with a dramatically wrong understanding of the commercial value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is actually so. So Bill gets you that before usually you start putting together the economics. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'd say before and during because there's always questions. It's like a lot of things in this business, it's complicated. That's why there's so many different disciplines, and uh, you need to get experts in different areas to help you interpret the sort of put their business into layman's terms. So I need Bill to put land into layman's terms so I can use it effectively as an example.
I got you. So Bill, explain that a little bit when you put land into simple terms.
Well, one thing is, in the good old days, long time ago, the royalty under an oil and gas lease was 1/8, and you could deduct expenses from that royalty, the cost to produce it, the cost to get it out, cost to separate it, and the royalty goes to the mineral owner or owners. That 1/8 royalty is long gone. We're lucky today if we can negotiate a lease that has a 20% royalty. Um, but most of the royalties on the new leases, especially in the Permian, are 25%. So that means when you produce a barrel of oil, 25% of that or a quarter of it goes to the landowner or mineral owner, and the 75% that's remaining goes to the oil company. Um, the difference today is it's not only for the leases from private mineral owners, but many states now have adopted this rule, as you cannot deduct post-production expenses. Post-production expenses means that when you sell a barrel of oil, when you pay your royalty owner, you cannot deduct the cost to compress it. If it goes into a pipeline, you can't deduct the cost of the pipeline to hook it up. If you have to treat it, you can't deduct those. So it's a true, if oil's selling for $100 a barrel, um, the royalty owner is going to get a quarter of $100 a barrel less taxes. Yeah, everybody pays their taxes, but the oil company will have to bear the burden of compression, treating, transportation, all those, and that can be significant. The other thing to note for a lot of our listeners or folks who hear this is when you hear about a price of oil on television or the radio, just be careful because they're not all the same. When we talk about West Texas Intermediate, that's specific to pretty much oil produced in Texas from the Permian. A lot of the TV announcers nowadays will interchange that along with Brent crude, which is Europe. It's kind of like somebody tells you, well, how hot is it today? Well, it's 100 degrees. Well, that's not the real temperature. The real temperature is 92, but with the humidity, it feels like 100 degrees. Mm-hmm. So and it also depends upon the price of oil, depends upon your contract with your oil purchaser. You may be paying more or less than WTI or West Texas Intermediate. Same thing for gas. There's places in the Permian Basin which we're really not at the moment, where there are still companies are having to pay pipeline companies to take their gas. So not only do they produce it as a byproduct, but they're having to pay to get the gas out, and you can't separate them underground. And that's being remedied because there were not enough pipelines going into the Permian Basin, and now there's several major trunk lines that will help eliminate that need.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So this is the last question for you guys today. I'll give it to each of you, but I'll start with Ian first. So Ian, just kind of looking ahead, what do you think, what's the most optimistic thing that you see for the industry of oil and gas over the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think I remain convinced that demand is going to continue to improve or increase. interesting. Bill mentioned natural gas infrastructure. I think that's something that is going to continue to build out significantly, especially in Texas. There is, I think, if I go to outside of the oil industry for a second, is that if we look at the demand for natural gas and for oil, I I think it's a strong future. If we consider all electrification now, everybody's all, I shouldn't say everybody, but some people are all about electrifying everything and the zero environmental impact cars and everything else. Uh, but if you take the electrification of things on top of the data centers, that's a massive increase in electricity uh, generation that has to happen. As it sits right now, something like 40% of all the uh, electricity is derived from gas, and I think another, say, 30% is derived from oil. Then there's coal also, but there's a very large portion of our electricity comes from hydrocarbons, and that's what our business is. So as people get excited about energy, guess what? You need more hydrocarbons to supply it. So, and then on top of that, I think, as I understand it right now, aviation uses something like 10 to 15% of all the oil demand in America. And I think just as an observation, that I don't think people are stopping flying anytime soon. So I think that's only going to increase. So overall, I just see that that's an extremely strong position for oil to be in. There's going to be an increasing need for oil and gas in the decades to come.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Bill, what would you say?
Well, I absolutely agree with my colleague down the hall, Ian Crane. I was flying for the past couple of weeks. Every single flight was oversold. The price for jet fuel, which is basically kerosene, has been going up. And that's not going to stop. With every flight being sold or oversold, there will be more routes added, along with the increase in the number of plants to support AI, the big data centers. Even though a lot of the data centers are going to pay their own way, that's wonderful, but they got to get it through the grid. And right now it's mainly gas. I think we will see uh, uh, an effort leaning toward nuclear. Is economically green as wind and solar are. The sun will always be there, but the wind sometimes may or may not blow. When you really need it at peak times, it's called you've got to be able to have a peak load to support all of our activities, whether it's on your cell phone or watching TV, running the air conditioner. And the only thing that will support the peak load right now is oil and gas with a smaller percent of nuclear, because it'll always be there. And so I think the outlook for hydrocarbons, until we can figure out how to harness sunlight from the sun in orbit around the Earth and get that energy down to the surface, we're a long ways from that, but we're headed that direction.
Yep, absolutely. It's a much needed industry that seems to reinvent itself time and time again and always be found relevant and needed. So if you guys want more information regarding what all we do here at King Operating for investors, and please go to kingoperating.com, fill out that learn more form, and we'll get in contact with you and share a little bit more about our current opportunities here at King. And I want to mention as well that we do have a John Mauldin is our chief economist here at King Operating. So we are going to be having a webinar tomorrow with him and our founder and CEO, Jay Young. So that's America's Energy Moment, the global shift in energy. We would love to have you join us on that live. And you can find the link, should be below in the comments section if you check down there. So please register for that, and we'll see you next week, same place, same time. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. See you next time, everyone.